So I guess we'll start off by just introducing who Resi are and what we do. In summary, Resi is the largest home extension platform in the UK. We've currently done over 9,700 projects at last count, I believe. So we're by far the most experienced residential practice that there is. And our goal in general is just making the whole home improvement experience more enjoyable. We were founded when our CEO, Alex, she went to extend her own home and just found the process stressful, unregulated, confusing, and yeah, wanted to create a space where that wasn't the case. And that's what we do. And essentially, yeah, make the home improvement journey accessible to the everyday homeowner without stress. So that's Resi. In terms of me and Ben, do you want to go through your role?
Yes, so I'm an associate technical designer here at Resi. I've been in the architecture industry for just over a decade, and most of that time has been spent in residential architecture, working with homes, new builds, renovations, extensions, conversions, etc. I am part of the technical design team here at Resi, so I sort of oversee RIBA stages 4 and then partially into 5 onwards. So that's the sort of getting you on site, getting you compliant, and getting this sort of drawings and information put together that your builder will use. However, I am experienced in the earlier stages, which we'll also cover with respect to the initial concept design, planning stages and survey stages of your project. But before that, you'll probably be speaking with someone like my colleague Heather here, who's one of our sales consultants.
That's right, yes. So my name's Heather. I'm one of the senior consultants here at Resi. I've been doing this now at Resi for just over 3 years. And essentially my job means speaking to people every day about their extensions. So it's lots of fun, and it's just about making those unknowns known for people, which is similar to what we're looking to do here today. So yeah, it means I've spoken to tens of thousands of people about their project, and yeah, essentially is the starting point of the journey where I then pass things on to our designers like Ben. So yes, again, please feel free to put some questions in the chat. We've been sent through a few as well, which have gone through the agenda of what we're doing today. So I think what we'll do is just jump straight into those, and yeah, feel free to drop more into the chat as we go.
We apologise in advance if any of the matters are quite technical, or if you don't understand what we're saying. We understand that you've got 2 accents to deal with here. Heather's is not as sharp and as strong as mine is, so I'll do my best to speak proper English rather than broad Geordie. But yeah, we'll cover all of your questions at large, and like we say, just drop anything into the chat that you want us to cover, or if you want us to expand on any other points or queries that you may have with your own potential renovations and extension projects.
Perfect. I think the first one we'll kick off on then is a question around whether or not you can extend to the back of the property once you've already extended to the side through permitted development. Essentially, this client's done a side extension. They're looking to build a conservatory behind that, but that goes along the full width, which wouldn't be allowed. Isn't that right, Ben?
Yeah, that's right. So basically, this client's come to us with an existing side extension that's been built under permitted development. Permitted development does allow you to do a side extension. It also allows you to do a rear extension. However, it does not allow you to join a side and a rear extension. If you imagine we've got a house like this, and we go out to the back and then out to the side, that small portion there that would connect the two together then takes into the realm of what's known generally in the industry as a wraparound extension. A wraparound extension is not covered under permitted development rights, which we'll get into a little bit later. Permitted development rights is a centralised scheme designed by central government to allow people to extend their homes, but it's a very, very black and white objective measure of getting permission for that, for the types of allowances it will give you in terms of an extension. A wraparound becomes a lot more subjective, and that tends to be within the realms of a householder planning consent or a full app planning consent, which is decided by the supplementary planning guidance of your local council. Now, we'll get into what all of these different essences of the planning routes are with respect to what you can and can't do with your property. But in short, a wraparound extension isn't covered by permitted development, which this client has been able to use for their side and rear extension. When you connect the two together, it can certainly strengthen the chances of you getting an approval by the fact that you've already got these items built, by the fact that they're already permitted under the Permitted Development Act. But we would actually advise that you go and get householder consent for any form of wraparound extension. We'll also get into the really technical aspects of what rights your property has. And this is largely dependent upon the area that your property is situated within, which council, which borough you're in, and if they've placed any specific consent requirements on your property. But we'll get into that in a little bit later.
Exactly. I think a good idea would maybe to scale things back and start at the beginning, which is essentially, where do I get it started and how do I know where to get started? Before we do, a quick question from the Instagram, which is Resi only in London? Short answer is no. We operate throughout the whole of England, Wales. There's pretty much no postcode that we've not done a project in now. But if you want to specifically know if we can cover your property and your project, you can also book in for a free advice call with myself or one of our other consultants to just go through your project in a more bespoke way. But starting at the beginning, I want to extend my property and I don't know where to start. What's the first step? I think for me, there's three main things you should look at if this is the position you're in. The first is probably the most simple. It's, what do you want? What is it that you're looking out of your house? Do you need an extra bedroom? Do you have a growing family and you need to future-proof the space? Do you want a bigger kitchen, open plan? Are you stuck in that galley kitchen every evening and it's driving you crazy? So first of all, what do you want? Second of all, what realistically is the budget that you have to invest in this project? It's very easy to design something that's beautiful, gorgeous, fits you perfectly, but if it's not within what you can or want to spend on the property, then that's just not a good use of anyone's time. And then the third thing is general feasibility, similar to what Ben's just gone through around permitted development and planning. It's what restrictions might be on my property. Am I in a conservation area? Is there precedence? Can I do this under permitted development? What's essentially possible? And so again, for the first point, what do you want? Take some time to think about that. That's arguably the most important one. But for the other two, that's exactly what we're here to help with. Wherever you are in your improvement journey, come to us and we can talk you through these things, make sure that if you get started, when you get started, those expectations are set early on. So second question here, what is the difference between Resi and a traditional architect? Well, what would you say, Ben?
Yeah, well, having worked in the traditional architecture practice, I've actually worked in that role and then seen how many improvements Resi have made on the process. At the start of the video, for those of you who weren't here, Heather briefly introduced why Resi was started. It was actually because our own CEO had a very bad experience with the traditional type of architecture practice. And over the many years that we've been training as a business, we've looked to refine the journey, the client journey as you move through the architectural process. I think one of the main things that we do a lot better is with respect to our speed and efficiency. We work with new technologies to try and advance the project stages that would normally take months within a traditional practice down to weeks. So that's everything from using the latest digital theodolite software to actually come out to your property, make a digital twin on day one of your entire house so that we can review it when we create our new proposed drawings based off of it with really, really high accuracy, done at really, really high speed. And then right the way throughout the journey, we have different teams of specialized individuals, specialized design professionals who are able to advance the statuses that usually in a traditional practice or with a traditional architect, you'll be waiting a long time because they're sort of set within their ways with respect to what they can do, particularly if they're a smaller individual practice. And again, I've got experience of doing that myself, and I know how long it tends to take firsthand, and why our own CEO was probably a little bit miffed the first time she did work with a traditional architect. But what Resi has is just a real wealth of experience, a real vigor when it comes to advancing the architectural process for our clients. But we do it with a strong eye towards detailing, efficiency, high quality, and like Heather was saying, that there's very few postcodes that we haven't worked in. When it comes to our sort of knowledge with respect to building codes, building regulations matters, technical on-site matters, and specific planning policy guidance, you'll be very hard pressed to find an architectural designer or an architectural practice that can offer what Resi has, simply because of the scale and quantity of delivery that we've served the UK with for well over 7 or 8 years now. I think it is, isn't it?
8 years, I believe. Yeah. I completely agree. I think the experience that we have having done so many projects is just completely unmatched. And then the way that we harness technology and data to feed back into the process for customers at the start of their improvement journey is just, it's doing the meta-analysis of everything that we know, right? And that's, yeah, just really important. I think it all comes to expectation setting. Cool, let's pop into another few questions we've got.
Yeah, so we've got some questions that some people have added in the chat here. We'll just have a little look through.
I have an existing extension on the back of my house which covers half of the back of my house, and I want to fill in the gap. Is this allowed under permitted development?
Good question. So this will totally depend upon what you've got built, and I would ask that you reach out to Resi for a consultation with some plans, even if they're just estate agents' plans or brief sketches of your property, so we can actually answer the question in full. The key thing is here, with whatever you've got built, to basically abridge that, the final extension must comply with what's allowed under your permitted development rights. So in terms of height, usually being up to 3 meters and 2.5 at the boundary, depending on whether or not it's a detached property or semi-detached or terrace property as well. This will also affect it. And I have seen it done. It just depends completely on the how far out you've actually extended and how you've extended in terms of the heights of your property. Often, if it's sort of a grey area between whether or not what you've built right now that you intend to make larger is within PD or not, usually it's better to actually go under a householder planning permission route, just to eliminate any sort of confusion or any doubts. It's completely project specific. We do see a lot of these sorts of projects where you've got a little bit of a lean-to. Often it's a badly built lean-to as well, and actually it becomes better sense to actually demolish it and replace it entirely with a new scheme that's going to fall within your PD rights. So the answer is it depends, but it's not uncommon that you see an existing structure like that qualifying under the permitted development rights, and thereby being able to be made wider along the full span of the rear of the house, and applied for within the permitted development route. Just totally depends on what's been built beforehand.
We might start to sound like a broken record, I think, today, saying it totally depends, because for projects like this, everything is case by case, depending on the context.
Every project is a prototype. But again, I mean, it wouldn't be architecture if everything was the same time over and over.
Exactly.
So,
it wouldn't be fun.
yeah.
I also think something to keep in mind as well is that a lot of people are often afraid of going through the planning route, but it's not something to be afraid of.
No.
Just because it needs planning doesn't mean it's not possible, doesn't mean we can't be confident about that going into the project, and really doesn't actually change the Resi process all that much at all. All it changes is that instead of applying for permitted development certificate, we're applying for planning permission. Timelines are the same, everything else is the same. So essentially you just don't have to make decisions about these things early on. You can wait until the design dictates what you need to do, really. Our next question is quite a similar one. An existing extension on the back of the house. Can we fill in the gap between that and the garage?
That was that one, and then the next one is even, this one's very similar to this
Infill
one.
between the garage and the
So if we've got a single story infill between the garage, I'm guessing a detached garage perhaps, and the main house, is this under the permitted rights? Usually it's not. One of the stipulations of the permitted development GDPO, the central planning order for permitted development, is that you can't join two principal elevations together or an existing outbuilding. We do see these proposals happen quite a lot, especially when you're trying to create a utility infill between the main house and the garage. Usually, from my experience, it's always been a householder application route for that. However, in terms of your chances of getting approval for that, first thing you should be doing, and I guess this is a larger question about what do I do at the start of a project when I want to understand if I can get approval for something, go out and have a look at precedents in your area. And when I say go out, you don't literally have to go out. You can go on Google Earth and have a little scan over and see what other neighbours have built. But also go onto your council's planning authority websites. Every single council has their own planning authority register where you can go and see what neighbours and people in your area have actually tried to get permission for. If you have a look and see what similar, you can actually use keywords as well, like for example in this one you might say garage, you might say infill, to see if anyone else has tried to get approval for something similar. So that will give you a good idea on what the best success rate will be per planning route. But better still, come to us and do a planning consultation with ourselves, or a sales consultation with ourselves. We've usually done something very similar in your area. or within your borough, within your postcode, or we can look up precedents ourselves, and then we can actually advise you correctly what your best chance is of getting planning permission for that. These are very common, by the way, these side infill between the garage and the main house. They do happen quite often. And the fact that you're building in between two masses can actually strengthen the chances of getting approval, particularly if it's a detached garage or something like that.
Yeah, I think perfect example of where something might not be permitted development, but isn't necessarily still a strong project, low risk of refusal,
Yeah.
great project. Yeah. Our next question is an interesting one. What is the difference between resi and resi glass? I have been given a quote for both. So essentially, resi glass is a new product that we've launched, which is for projects which are of a specific, what would you call it then?
I would say that the high-end bespoke projects that maybe you're trying to create something completely individual, rather than just adding a box or a mass to the house, and perhaps budget isn't your priority and you want to explore something of a very bespoke and architectural nature. This is a new service that Resi are beginning to sell, and we've had numerous sales recently of this new bespoke product journey. In short, we'll probably prepare for you a lot more drawings and a lot more detailing, and a lot more presence within your project than we would on a standard Resi project. This isn't to say that our typical Resi journey won't, allow for us to hold your hand right the way throughout the process, get you something that you can build on site to budget, and to scale, and actually create a sense of delight and awe that you would expect from an architectural design process and journey. Glass is a totally different planning route. It's a totally different design route. That we are looking to trial, and basically it will include many other different design outputs that you wouldn't normally get from our traditional Resi design route, basically. And this will be highly specific to your project and to your needs. It might be that you want additional site visits from us. It might be that you want additional drawings, such as furniture layout drawings. You might want electrical and lighting plans on top of other technical detailing drawings. It might be that you want to explore different feasibility routes, additional options for the design. You might want to have a look at 6 different proposals before deciding which one you want to take to planning. All of these things are accommodated by Resi Glass, and this is why for that particular client you'll have 2 quotes there. You've got our usual design flow for Resi traditional, and then Resi Glass is that little bit extra. It's a bit more of a bespoke route that we're currently introducing to the market.
Exactly. And I think if your consultant has quoted you for resi glass as well, it's because your project has qualified for it and likely needs the extra level of specification and detail required for a scope such as what you're doing. Our next question is, hi, how can you make sure that your builder is using adequate building materials for your project and doing a proper work aside from checks from the building controllers? Great
Yes.
question.
Okay,
That's
so
the
this is
main
about
question.
how do you manage a builder? If you are from a construction background and you've managed jobs on site before, I'd say that you're probably pretty good at project management. You can manage your builder yourself. But even those of you who do fall into that bracket, it's still worth understanding how technical building an extension or building a renovation really is. There's 2 sides to this. The first thing is that you should absolutely have a set of really well specified technical drawings. This is what my team head up in the building regulations team here at Resi. So we put together a set of drawings that don't just communicate to the builder and to every single other third party involved on the project how things should be built to achieve compliance, but we actually specify the material buildups as well, whether that's designated for structural matters by the structural engineer, or installations with respect to achieving compliance under Part L of the building regulations. The first thing that you need is a set of really detailed, well-specified drawings that the builder can follow and follow properly without confusion. The second thing is that you want to make sure that you're getting a good builder who has a decent amount of experience when it comes to the sort of project that you're going to be building, so they understand how to do residential extensions. This is why we have our Connect network here at Resi, where we heavily vet and source local builders near to where your project is, so that you're getting someone who can understand the drawings, understand how to build, deliver a high level of quality. They've got a good credit history, they've got a good business history, they're personable, and they can react to change on site, and they can react to all the other things that you would expect from a builder on site really well and efficiently. And then finally, if you can manage the project yourself and use our technical drawings and specification to understand how the builder should be performing, great. You can try manage the project yourself. That is not common for a lot of clients, particularly on big projects, which is why I would suggest thinking about appointing a project manager or a contract administrator. So again, within our Connect supplier network, we have numerous different project managers who work locally within the M25. We may be able to source one from further afield. But basically, if you're not confident that you know how to build your extension and you want someone to ensure that your builder is going to, it would be a good idea to think about hiring a project manager. They can actually take a lot of the burden, a lot of the time and grief and the indecision that you might face yourself working with a builder directly and trying to manage the project for them and operate it themselves. One second thing I would just like to come back to on the second point is with respect to getting a good, competent builder. A good, competent builder can usually manage themselves. When you apply through our Connect network, most of the companies that we work with have their own 4 people, they have their own project managers, and they have people who can actually make the journey transparent to you as a layperson. They don't underestimate the fact that they're taking apart your house and rebuilding it and putting it back together with a nice new extension, and all of the worries that may go along with that, which is why we actually, during the design phase and once the design is sort of finalized, we actually get our clients to go and have site visits with builders early on. So they'll come out to your property. You can get a feel for what it's going to be like working with that individual. So that even if you're not going to act as project manager fully, or you're going to sort of have a go at it yourself, you're going to be working with a contractor who's going to be able to satisfy your requirements and be able to ensure that they're going to deliver that quality to you. The other thing as well, as the question sort of leads to, is that during the process of the build, a building notice should be served. The local building control authority or a registered building control approver will be coming out to site and making sure that the works are done in a compliant manner. If they're not being done in a compliant manner, they'll serve that in a report, and it'll be upon the contractor, who will be noted as the principal contractor under the Building Safety Act, to put them right. So there's numerous different avenues, but if you're ever working on a very, very big project that you feel is sort of out of your realm of having to project manage, and you don't want to be in a position where you're relying solely on the builder's expertise and trust, along with whatever contract that you might have in place with them, you might want to think about project management.
I agree. I think that's very true for the big projects. I also think that at Resi, for the, not, I don't want to say smaller projects, but more kind of bread and butter extensions, loft conversions, it is more common that our clients don't engage a project manager because of what Ben's just said. I think it's testament to the quality of the building regulation drawings from the building regs team that it's just not necessary. Even clients who are working professionals, busy people, with that level of detail and with a good builder, you just don't need that extra level of support. So
Yeah.
yeah,
You got to think of the time it takes out of your week as well when
exactly.
the project's going up on site.
So our next question is around budget. I think I want to create a design that I can implement over time. Is this something Rosie can help with? Absolutely. I think it's a great question, and actually something I get asked probably every day.
Same.
It's the best way to do it. If you're thinking about your house, your home for the long term, the best thing you can do from the start is create yourself a big master plan and a roadmap as to how you achieve that. And the most important thing you can do is start that master plan at the start, because you don't want to box yourself into any certain type of design or way of going about things. It allows us to look at the whole property holistically from the outset. And starting the process in design, with Resi anyway, it doesn't lock you into anything long term. It doesn't lock you into the whole process or even the build. We're here to then support you on what makes sense to do first, second, third. How can we look at that long-term future vision with you and just make sure that everything works properly and works together.
Yeah, and it comes up quite a lot. I think the other thing as well, particularly when you're phasing a project where different parts of that project will be added at different levels of a property, you have to think about the structural implications. So a common one is we're doing some works at the ground floor. We're going to do a couple of internal alterations on the first floor, and then we're going to do a loft on the top floor. The loft will add a significant amount of weight to the property. So if you're going to do the ground floor first, design everything holistically so that all of the steel work, all of the load-bearing members that will support the loft down the line when you build that, whenever you build that, are already in place when you do the ground floor works. So you're not causing yourself abortive works. Similarly, if you're looking at doing chimney breast removals, if you're looking at doing repair jobs that are sort of necessary as part of a primary objective and extension work secondary, then you want to phase this into your plan as well so that you're getting best bang for your buck out of your builders whenever they do that first phase of works. But also in that first phase of works, you're not doing anything abortive that is going to require you to rip off plasterboard or rip out things down the line in order to install things that really could have been done beforehand to future-proof your phasing.
The last thing we want is to pay for something twice.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, our next question is around principal designer. Interesting question. For projects where many jobs would DIY or individual trades as opposed to one designer or practice, if we're subcontracting smaller jobs and doing a lot of the work ourselves, do we need to list ourselves as principal designer, and what does this make us liable for? How do we protect or insure ourselves? Thank you.
Yeah, good question. So with respect to the principal designer for most projects, the first thing to understand under the Building Safety Act is there's a principal designer and there's a principal contractor. Principal designer specifies matters usually up for conditional approval, and anything that the principal contractor varies from that plan is upon them and their liability, and they should have their own, to answer your second question, public indemnity insurance for that liability as either a contractor or a subcontractor. Generally, if you are going to subcontract out portions of work, I would have separate contracts for those individuals. JCT minor works, for example, will be enough to protect your liabilities as well as theirs. With respect to the principal designer, the question is, how often are you going to change the design that usually is ourselves, the architectural designer will be the principal designer. How often are you going to change what they've put into plan? And if you're not, then generally your role within however much of the work you're going to do yourself, however much of the work is going to be done by subcontractors, the principal designer role will usually stay therefore with the architect unless you're going to change significant portions of the design continually, in which case you might as well be the principal designer, because if anything were to happen, you were trying to get the principal designer back and forth as the principal contractor, it would still be within your realm of responsibility as the principal contractor. Now, if you are going to do works yourself and sort of do a bit of DIY along with some day rates or some subcontracting from building professionals, first of all, I would make sure that your building insurance covers you for that you yourself are competent enough to take on your own public liabilities and indemnity if need be. Bear in mind as well, for a lot of works, it will affect your adjoining owners' properties as well, so you've got to factor that into the premium. And then, yeah, like I said earlier, that you've got a strong contract between you and any subcontractors, and that you understand that if you vary the work, or if something is done on site that is not to be detailed or hasn't been detailed by your principal designer and has achieved conditional compliance with your inspectors prior to it, then bear in mind that those liabilities fall upon yourself. All the same, for small projects, I've had numerous clients come to us at Resi and say, look, I've been building, God knows what all my life, ships and towers and all sorts. Like, I think I can do an extension, and I'll just get a couple of builders in to do here, this, that, whatever. That's fine, but it's about understanding exactly where your liabilities lie, where your own public indemnity insurance bears, your building insurance, where that bears, and then also all of the other things that a contractor would normally have to think about. So, have you got party wall matters in place? Are you building exactly to what you've had planning approval for? Are you building to the building regulations documentation and drawings that your principal designer has put together? Have you thought about water authorities and build-over agreements, etc.? If you're willing to take on that responsibility, fine, but understand the ramifications.
How do you being Resi, compare to a traditional architect in terms of cost? Love this question. Such a good one. So it's a tricky one, because what does a traditional architect cost? You can go out there and you can find quotes that are going to be cheaper than Resi, and you can find quotes that are going to be more expensive than Resi. It comes down to the value and what you're paying for, because architectural service is not a one-stop, this is what it is, alpha, beta. It's a spectrum of different types of deliverables and inputs and exactly how the process works. So traditionally, an architect costs anywhere from 5 to 10% of the build cost. That's not how we do it at Resi. We will quote for your project in terms of all of the architectural work upfront, which is fixed and transparent. There's no locking you into that. You can just move through the process step by step, but our goal is just around transparency and planning finances and just making sure that that's all clear from the start. So yeah, I think it's a really interesting question because it comes down to not necessarily cost, but also value. And I can guarantee there's no one out there that's got value for money like Resi. But as I say, you can find architects cheaper. You can find architects that will charge you absolutely blinding fees. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. I mean, we have obviously compared our service offering to other architects out there. I'll tell you now from working in traditional practices throughout the majority of my life, we may be beaten on price, we'll never be beaten on speed and efficiency. That's a fact. I mean, and our numbers show it. Our Trustpilot rankings show that. And it's something that we're very obsessed with is the quality of our design process. It's something that we've constantly reconfigured over the years. And yeah, we're very confident to say that, we deserve to be in the industry leading shape and form that we're in.
Yeah, put it this way, we wouldn't be the #1 architect in such a short amount of time if our process didn't work.
I don't know if at this point we should probably mention that we've got a free survey offer at the moment for everyone
That is a really good point.
tuned in.
Yes. So as a webinar and Instagram promotion today, for anyone that does want to book in a free advice call with one of our consultants, mention that you came through from the webinar or from the Instagram live, and you'll have a free survey if you're in London. If you're outside of London, to the value of what a free London survey would have been. So yeah, definitely mention that.
That's a big chunk of your architect's fees, by the way.
Which
really,
you can
really good
put
value.
straight back into your build.
Back into your build, that's it. This is a good question. How far in advance of waiting to start the work do we get Resi involved?
Very good question. My advice to people on this is have your first call ideally a year before you plan to start the build, if not beforehand, as soon as you can. And I think that ties into probably one of the #1 mistakes I think people make with this whole process is not giving themselves enough time to go through the journey, because you can always pause a project. You can give yourself time to think. You can give yourself your planning authority time to issue your decision. You can't ever go back and start sooner. So you'll never regret starting sooner rather than later if you are serious about the project. That's the goal. If you're on a pinch, if you need something done as soon as possible, then I would say 6 months, potentially shorter. But this is where we start to get really case by case as to how quickly something can go through. Some things are within your control, some things are not. For example, does it need planning? How long is your authority taking? Do you know exactly what you want, or are you going to need to take a bit more time in design to digest things and provide feedback and really sit on your decisions? So lots of factors at play, but the summary is as long as you can, basically.
Yeah, that's it. And I think, look, I appreciate that when people look at their personal finances and whether or not they do an architectural project or an extension, there's lots of different things that come to their mind that they might be able to do with that money. What I would say is the second it enters your mind that you could develop your property, that you could extend it, get in touch with the likes of ourselves and understand what the implications are. You maybe find that what you're looking to do, it could be that you actually need a lot more money for what you're trying to do to your property. It could be that you don't need as much money. And it's important to understand early on with a good roadmap and a good amount of distance before you actually get into the potential of getting on site, what the implications are, and whether or not the dream's sort of worth pursuing now or worth pursuing later. So the second it comes into your mind that you're thinking about doing a home renovation or an extension, it's important that you get in touch with us here at resi.co.uk, have a free consultation call, and we'll basically give you a bit of a nod in the right direction so that you're making best use of your time and you're making best use of your available finances.
100%. That's what we're here for, is to do the feasibility and cost analysis for you. All right, our next question comes from Instagram. What is the advantage of Resi versus a design and build company?
Great question. So I have experience of working within and alongside a design and build company. With design and build, the idea and the principle is that you lock in a price basically from day one, and that the process from then on in is very sort of linear. Often a design and build company will work with a particular contractor or a set of contractors, and they have an understood method of building. What I would say with a design and build company is if they've locked in a price and something comes up, they will do their utmost to get back down to that price. It's not within their want nor need to actually start incurring costs upon themselves when they've locked in a total build a cost and design fee. So what that often means is, these days, I don't think a lot of design and build companies are the ones to cut corners. Most of those got found out earlier on, when it started becoming a real option for house extensions and renovations. But it could mean that you are lacking a little bit on quality and finishes down the line. The other thing to think about is, depending on the price that you are going to lock in, if you suddenly have a bit of a change of heart with respect to your final design, or if something comes up and you need to think of a method to overcome it on site, let's say it's some shared drainage found, or party wall matters doesn't go as smoothly with your neighbour as you'd hoped, and what the implications are on your final design and how things look, if the price is preset, then again, this could result in lower quality work being done on site, and corners having to be sort of folded, if not cut, to get your project to work. With Resi, I mean, I appreciate that we are a very popular architectural design group, and we are, in terms of our digital presence, it's a lot more than a normal architect. But in terms of the hand-holding and the design process and the concept delivery process, it's a lot more similar to what a traditional architecture practice is than it is to a design and build company. And in terms of testing your options and seeing which ways you can go with respect of your design, and finalising it and getting it to a point that you're happy with it, and knowing that corners won't be cut towards the end, and that you can have a good range of builders that you can pick, we're a lot better a service offering than, I would say, a design and build company.
100%. I couldn't agree more. And I think even for customers that don't choose to work with Resi for whatever reason, I wouldn't ever advise a design and build company. It just puts all your eggs in one basket from the start. For a decision like building, like extending, you want to shop the market. You want to have a detailed plan of exactly what's happening. You want to take that to multiple people to know that you are getting the best value for what you actually want, and not for an early conversation and consultation. Things can change, things change all the time. So yeah, always shop the market.
This is a fun question. In a conservation area with Article 4 directive, Enfield Council, we know Enfield Council very well. Can you explain about this? Would Resi be able to cover this specific requirement? So what this viewer is asking is, property is in a conservation area. It has Article 4 directive. What does that mean with respect to how they can extend and how they can develop their property? So the first thing that we know for certain, if you're in a conservation area, your property does not have permitted development rights. So all of the allowables within the GDPO, the town planning order that pertains to permitted development, they will not be applicable to your property. You will probably have to go through a full app or a householder application planning route to get any extensions added. Does that mean that you can't extend? Absolutely not. We have in-house planning consultants here at Resi who've worked throughout the country in various boroughs. Some of them have worked in enforcement, some of them have worked in conservation areas and planning stipulation. They've also worked in putting together the UDP plans for specific boroughs, so they understand about actually setting what a conservation area's requirements are, and not just deciding planning applications within them. So to answer the second question here, would Resi be able to cover this specific requirement? Absolutely. And it'll be down to our research of what the planning authorities, what Enfield's planning supplementary planning guidance will be. It'll be about looking at precedents within your area, specific to that conservation area, and then looking at all allowables within any of the central planning orders as well, because there's parts that overlap there, even with conservation areas. So yes, a little bit tricky, will require some involvement, but you couldn't come to a better group of architects who can actually advise you on the best way to get an extension added to your property, regardless of you being in a conservation area.
100%. High risk planning projects are almost our specialty because of our fabulous in-house planning team.
Yeah.
But for a question like this, Belinda, I really advise you booking for a free advice call, because it's quite bespoke. We would need to do a bit of research around your area, your SPD, as Ben said. So yeah, booking for that call. If you do end up working with Resi, like we said, you'll get a free survey as well. So our next question is, how does our pricing work? Which is, it's a good question. Our pricing is bespoke for every project, really. In part of the free advice call that we've been mentioning today is also creating that bespoke quote for your project, and that is because our pricing is down to the scope of the work that you're looking to do. For example, a loft conversion is going to be priced quite differently with the architectural fees compared to a two-story wraparound extension. So it's about understanding what is the scope of the work. It is not about what is your budget. We are not a practice that will inflate our fees because you have a higher budget. Our delivery is around making sure that it's affordable for you during the architectural process, and our fees are purely set by what we are delivering.
Mhm.
Our next question is from Fiona. I'm about to put in an offer on a one-bedroom house and would like a kitchen diner extension. At what point would you start the process of applying for planning permission? It's vacant, but I guess you need to wait for the sale to go through
No,
first.
no, you don't need to wait for the sale to go through first. If you're in the process of an exchange, we've had several clients do this, by the way, probably hundreds.
Yep.
They're in the process of an exchange and they want to get on with the works as soon as they, can sort of move in, or just thereafter once they've moved in, and get the ball rolling in terms of getting your planning permission and everything else sorted before you get on site. Once you're in the exchange process, if you can get access to the property,
For about an hour,
for about an
and a
hour
half.
for us to come in and do our 3D survey, we can start cracking on with the initial drawings, the initial survey, and move your project forward. The situations that we've often seen, particularly with delays in the exchange process, also don't prohibit you from going forward with a planning application. Sometimes it requires an additional certification from the current owner to the potential new owner to say, yes, I'm happy for you to put this application in for this new extension that you're thinking about. Although you do have to be a bit savvy about that, because if you do get approval, they might put the price up. So it doesn't happen often, but if it ever got to that point, yeah, it can't actually. The only thing that could prohibit you from moving forward would be if the seller didn't placate you in allowing us to come outside and do the survey, but the seller wants to sell the property. Usually they'll be very
It's a
agreeable
green,
to that.
yeah, green flag, particularly in this case where the property's vacant.
Yeah.
It happens all the time. I would say about half the people that I speak to are purchasing, and about half of those will start before they complete. Just, it comes down to that question before around when should I start? The sooner you start, the better. If you're sitting around waiting for solicitors and vendors and people to get their shit together, for lack of a better word, then take advantage of that time.
Yeah.
All right, next question comes from Instagram. Are there any issues with having a separate contractor or builder take on your plans versus a one-stop shop company?
Yeah, getting your own builder. I mean, we're working with people who've extended before or done building works before, and they have a builder that they trust or a family recommendation. By all means, if you want to use them to build your extension as opposed to a builder within our Connect network, that's absolutely fine. What we'll even do, because we like to give a bit of a holistic process and hold your hand right the way throughout the journey, if you would like us to get prices from our builders, and you were to get a price from your builder and get tender documentation once you've got a nice, highly detailed technical drawings package, structural engineering package, and hopefully approved planning drawings, we'll actually do a tender analysis, including the prices that you go out and seek. And this isn't so that we can just sort of push our builders onto you. It's more so that we can give you further analysis of saying, look, here's what your builder's providing, here's what your builder's maybe not providing or not providing at the same market rate, and then just give you a bit of a comparison with what you could get out of our Connect network. And we're more than happy to do that. Not just that, when your project goes on site, even if you haven't got one of our Connect builders, if there's an issue on site or they need clarification on something on our drawings, or if something's discovered on site and that they need a bit of architectural assistance with, regardless of whether you pick a builder from our Connect network or not, we will be happy to act as the principal designer when you're on site to advise on what the principal contractor should be doing. We offer that completely free for any project, whether you go with one of our builders or one of your own.
Perfect. So our next question is around planning again. Is it best to have a prelim meeting with the council's planning department first, or best to put forward your plan and adapt as requested? This is a tricky one because it really depends on what your project is.
Yeah.
For 90% of projects, the answer is no. You are going to waste your time and your money if you go to the council beforehand to get their opinion, because one, you're going to have to make an application anyway, and two, what they say is not necessarily binding.
Yeah.
Especially if you work with Resi as well, because of our fantastic planning team, we realistically know what's acceptable and what's not acceptable for you very early on. That's essentially the purpose of our free advice call, and then how the design process works thereafter. So as I say, most of the time, not the case. However, there is this small portion of projects where it is a very useful route to go down, because it's not a case of, is this going to be acceptable or not? It's a case of, how much can I do? And that's where getting the feedback and letting the council feel involved in the process and the conversation can be very beneficial. So tricky one, not a yes, no answer, but sometimes it is the
Sometimes
answer.
it is not. And if you're thinking about doing something, we mentioned earlier on in the webinar about getting planning precedents and seeing what the borough allows or has allowed other neighbours or other people within your area to do with their properties. And if you're looking for something quite big and marvellous or completely bespoke, out of the ordinary, looking at materials that you wouldn't typically see on the street, looking at certain claddings or finishes that you might not see every day, large amounts of glass, things that are really going to change, hopefully for the better, the character of that property, then pre-planning can become a good route to sort of test what the planning authority really think about that particular extension. That might be a little bit out of the box. It can also be quite useful if you're in a conservation area and there's very, very strict guidelines on what you can and can't do, just so that you're not getting a refusal lodged on your property by not sort of fully understanding what the borough is going to allow you to do. All dependent upon the property, all dependent upon the type of thing that you're adding. Best thing to do is reach out to our in-house planning consultants team, and we'll guide you on the best way of securing a permission.
Exactly. So our next question now is quite a clean one, actually. I had a rear extension done with the planning application. Will I be allowed to have hip together loft under permitted development if I keep the height limitations? Not a conservation area. If PD is allowed, are there benefits to doing it through a full application process in the long term?
So by rear extension, I'm going to assume that you did a ground floor rear extension. That's absolutely fine. If you want to use your permitted development rights to do a hip to gable extension on the loft, absolutely fine. The two aren't really linked. They're two different areas of the property. Might be different if you did something, you're looking to do something on the ground floor abutting that rear extension. But with the loft, your PD rights are still there for you to use. Now, the key thing with permitted development rights for a loft, for any loft project, is that there is a certain amount of cubic meterage that is allowed to be added to the property. So if you imagine the extra lump that's being added on by your extension on top of what you've got at the moment, there is specific allowances on how much of that mass, how much of that volume can be added on top of the existing roofscape. For a terrace property and a semi-detached property, I believe it's 40 cubic meters. For a detached property, it's 50 cubic meters. So you get a lot more if you've got a detached property. But with a hip to gable extension, it's already quite complicated if we work out the volume of a dormer. So whether it's an L-shaped dormer and you put it over the outrigger, or just a simple box dormer where you're boxing out the back of the roof slope. But then when you start adding the additional mass of the hip to gable, adding on to the pitched roof, it becomes a very, very complicated amount of geometry that we, as the agents for the application, putting together the architectural drawings, we have to create very, very robust calculations to prove that we're within the volumetric allowance. So PD will be a good route for you to get permission for a hip to gable dormer. PD is obviously, a yes/no type application, so usually a low risk of refusal. But the key thing is, especially with hip to gable loft extensions, is that volumetric allowance, making sure that's right, making sure that's communicated well. This is the sort of thing that you're going to be relying on an architect to provide, and an architect who knows their 3D geometry. Everything we do here at Resi is done with a 3D model, astutely and with absolutely no error, and sort of getting you the most out of the maximum volume that you're allowed under your PD requirements.
That's the benefit of our 3D scan at the start. We'll squeeze every cubic millimeter out of that loft for you.
Yeah.
And to the second part of this question, are there any benefits to doing it through full planning in the long term? Not at all. As long as you get yourself your certificate of lawfulness and prove that everything is lawful and compliant, you can go through permitted development. That is the easier route. Our next question is around costs. How much roughly would it be for a 6 meter squared extension for a semi-detached property? Would you expect a full payment or accept monthly installments? This one, by 6 meters squared, I'm assuming you mean 6 meters total. It's a tricky one because build costs will vary significantly based on where you are, what you're doing with the existing property as well, structural considerations, the spec that you want the project finished to, the builder that you work with, so many things. It's really how long is a piece of string. For a question like this, the free advice call is perfect. We can go into build cost analysis in a bit more detail with you and just take you through how all of those decisions are made. It can vary across the country from 2,500 a square meter to 3,500 a square meter. But again, there's so many other factors that come into play that will affect that final amount. Would you expect a full payment or accept monthly installments? So to be clear, Resi is not doing the building. We're first and foremost an architectural practice. So it's not that we would accept those payments. However, we assist with the tender reviews and making sure that the builder that you get on site, whether they're from our network or not, as Ben said, you're protected. We would never recommend the full payment upfront. This is a huge red flag from a contractor. They should be able to float themselves to take things through on a staggered milestone installment process. And that's actually part of the tender review process. It's how is this builder charging? What are they charging for and when? Is it on a milestone basis or a timeline basis? Are we checking the work? How are we checking the work? So short answer is installments, not in full at the start, never in full.
Never in full.
Okay, so next question. I live in a semi-detached property and I'm thinking about a single-story extension on the back to extend the full length of the property. Will I need to get a party wall specialist to assist with boundaries, as it will affect the other attached house?
Yes, yeah, great question. Yes, party wall matters will often have to be served for that type of extension. I did a webinar some time ago now, which I believe is still on our YouTube, specifically about party wall matters with one of our colleagues, Anstey Horn. One of our partner companies, sorry, Anstey Horn, who are a party wall specialist. I would recommend watching that if party wall matters is something that's going to definitely come up in your project. To clarify, if you are extending and creating new foundations within 3 meters of a neighbouring property, this falls under one of the many sections of the Party Wall Act. I believe it's section 4. If you're building at or up to the boundary line, this also obviously falls within the Party Wall Matters, the Party Wall Act 1996. If you're building over the boundary, of course, you'll need Party Wall matters to be settled for this as well. By the sounds of this question, yes, party wall matters will have to be settled. It can often be a straightforward process if the neighbours are in agreement. They can merely sign a party wall consent letter that details in full all the works to be done, along with the ideally structural and technical drawings showing how the works are going to be done. But even when a neighbour might dissent to the notices, that is to say, no, I want a formalised party wall award formed, we can help you with that. Basically, we have within our Connect supplier network, we have party wall surveyors such as Anstey Horn, who I mentioned briefly there, MLA Limited and a few other companies that will basically take your project from that early stage of understanding that party wall matters need to be settled and helping you with the communications with the neighbour and helping you through that crucial stage of if a party wall award must be formed when a neighbour dissents to the notices, which is common, by the way. It doesn't mean that you can't build, it means that there needs to be a legal framework and agreement in how the works are going to be done. Again, our Connect network can handhold you through that process. It comes up on probably 70-80% of our projects that we do, probably more than that party wall matters needs to be settled. It's something that we're very, very knowledgeable about in the technical team, and we'll work alongside your appointed party wall surveyor once you get one to help you through that process.
All right, let's power through a few of these questions because we are running out of time now. Sure. Do you find or have contacts to tender for suitable local builders? Yes, 100%. That's the Connect network that Ben was referring to. This is a free service we offer as well. If you are looking for builders, come through to our Connect network. Even if we don't have builders in your location, we will still be able to help.
Yep.
If planning application is rejected, do the council list why? And if so, does this aid to the next submission?
Yeah.
Yes, they do. They issue a decision notice which lists the reasons for refusals, and then that informs how we go back into the process.
They usually also will put out a report so they'll say basically in a couple of sentences why they've refused it on the refusal notice, but they'll also put together a report that explains their decision making and what policies the borough have set out beforehand that have led to that application being rejected, which again, yeah, it can aid you in terms of the getting approval on the next submission.
But at Resi, we do not go to planning to get refused. So we are not in that situation, like 95% of the time. All right. Do you have any specific comments or concerns when replacing an existing conservatory with a more permanent structure that can be used year round? Will we be obliged to remain within the existing footprint of the conservatory?
No, you can make it a lot larger. And what I would say is known conservatory construction specifically from having done this sort of project over and over. Usually, conservatories obviously themselves were not insulated, the actual PVC structures or timber structures, but the floor that they were built off also wasn't usually insulated. So it's generally a good opportunity if you want to put something in that's going to perform a lot better thermally, as well as being a nice sunroom. You want to achieve that balance of it being not too cold in the winter and not too hot in the summer. So it's good to think about re-insulating the floor as well, or putting in a brand new slab if need be, or even just upgrading the current ground-bearing slab that it'll have been built off. So no, it doesn't limit you. You just need to think about, once again, what's your best planning route, and having a consultation call with ourselves will allow you to understand that.
All right, so our next question is about build materials. Are there any design choice elements that always cause more concerns during planning, such as cladding, green roof, glazing changes? Great question.
This is a good question. So I'll cover them. They all have, all those different examples there you've given have different sort of planning applications. Cladding, when it comes to things like zinc, whenever there's a material that isn't currently prevalent on the existing property, this is, I wouldn't say controversial, but it's just out of the ordinary for the planning authority to consider. There's more from a design aspect that we have to think about zinc or aluminium, corten cladding, all of these sorts of things. One, from justifying the planning permission and justifying that it's actually going to improve the property. And in certain instances, you can relate to the history of the site, or you can actually have a look for other precedents where similar materials have been used. So it is a planning concern, but it's one that you can usually justify quite well. Usually when we put in a planning application, we'll have a design and access statement that describes in writing why we believe the application should get approval. That's where we put in our justification for material choices, particularly when they're not prevalent on the existing property. Green roofs, most planning authorities love green roofs. They've got decarbonisation targets. They understand how brilliantly well insulated a green roof can be. They understand how brilliant they are for biophilia and introducing wildlife and green life to your property. Most authorities, even conservation areas, often are actually in favour of green roofs. Glazing changes, depends how much glazing you're after. Key thing about glazing is outlook. Do you affect the neighbouring amenity and the neighbour's right to a quiet and private life by the addition of the glazing that you're proposing? If it's going to lead to you being able to look more over your neighbour's property than as present, then that might be something to be assessed. It can lead into an overlook study or a right to light study. So it just depends really on how you're affecting the neighbourhood, how you're affecting the character, and how you're affecting the immunity of the neighbours when it comes to your material choices.
I'm looking to do a front and rear extensions once the building control technical drawings are completed. If I only go ahead with the rear extension due to budget, do I need a new set of drawings and to go through building control again?
No, but it's good to know. The earlier you can let your designer know about that, the better, because basically you'll be appointing an RBCA, Registered Building Control Approver, or a Council Building Control Officer. You'll be appointing a structural engineer to do portions of the work. Sometimes you want a set of plans that you might want to pick up in 3-4 years' time when you do the front extension, in which case that's fine, you pay your fees up front. But if you let us know in advance, then we can usually, with a bit of clever annotation, say this is phase A and this is phase B, and make sure that the builder prices for phase A and not phase B, or gives you a separate price for phase B, perhaps. But yeah, for something like that, I would say that that level of phasing is not a problem, and we can just strategize our package to actually show what the intention is in terms of what you want to build now and what you want to build later.
I think also a lot of these questions, they are very bespoke, and I really would recommend booking in for the free advice call so that we can go through this with you in a more one-to-one setting, go into a lot more detail around these specific project requirements, and just talk through the whole project and the whole process as a whole from the start. Um, Another question actually from Instagram is, what is your consultation call? Is it free? Yes, it's free. If you mention on the call that you've come through the webinar or the Instagram live as well, you'll also have a free survey if you do choose to work with Resi. The purpose of the call is to make as many of the unknowns known for you at the start of your journey as possible. So it's to go through any questions you have, the project, feasibility, budgets, timelines, but also we can take you through how the whole Resi process works so that you're aware of all of the phases, and we'll be able to create you a bespoke quote for your project after the call as well. So we'll send through a link after the call, after the webinar as well, to book in a free advice call, but anyone can go ahead and do it through their dashboard as well. Our next question is, do you have a very high level process flow you could share with who, what, and when we need to engage for an extension project? this, I sound like a broken record. I said it at the start, I'll say it again. Please book in for a free advice call. It's to go through the flow of the whole process. It's to go through any additional costs that you should know at the start, who you need to engage, when you need to engage them. This question is pretty much just exactly outline what the advice call is for.
And having popped over to your team a few times before, I understand that there's lots of videos that these guys use to actually sort of graphically break down step by step what's going to happen along the journey, and you'll come off that call knowing exactly what's going to happen before you even pay us a pound, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No cost, no obligation either. It's just about making sure that we are providing good fact-based information to our potential customers. And there's us out of time. I just want to say thank you to everyone who's joined us today. There are quite a few questions that we haven't been able to get through, so we'll try and reach out to these people directly where possible. We're not anonymous. But again, if you do want to speak to one of our consultants directly, you can. And a recording of this will be on YouTube, I believe, as well.
And also just today, I've got to put in a plug that we've got a brand new case study which I feature in with respect to an extension property where we've also retrofitted some insulation measures and some other mechanical measures for lowering the property's energy prices. So do have a look at that. It's live as of a few hours ago on our YouTube channel, and we look forward to you getting in touch.
It's a great video.
Thank you very much. Make sure to use basically mention that you've been on this webinar if you contact us with respect to the free survey, and we look forward to speaking with you and hopefully working on your future homes.
Thank you, everyone.